This is a design document for a video game that I dreamt up when I was 12 years old. Making games is in my blood. My father loved games as well. At his office, he created games out of work to make it more interesting. Things like production targets and sales goals were just a game for him. He'd have these massive whiteboards up, tracking progress and giving himself points along the way. He'd constantly introduce us to new games as kids. Sports, card games, board games, you name it. Our chores were even set up to be a game, and he eventually got me a Nintendo Entertainment System. At 7 years old, back in the 90s, this thing blew my little mind. The copious amount of hours I put into Mario games, a hobby I still maintain today, cemented video games as one of the cornerstones of my life. Fast forward 5 years, and my love of sketching cartoons and my love of video games collided as I started designing my own games on paper, as you saw in that little design document. Then my father once again dropped another life-changing gift on me, a Windows 95 computer and a book, the JAMSA's C and C++ Programmer's Bible. I was obsessed with this giant thing and taught myself how to program, with the promise of being able to make my own games driving me forward through what was basically a huge tech manual for grown-ups. It turned out that making games was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, and also not very fun. Instead of making Tales of the USA, I was bashing my head against just getting basic shapes to move around the screen, learning that my sound files might work on one person's computer but not the next, or finding out that there was basically zero chance of my game ever making it onto my beloved Nintendo consoles, as the developer kits were way out of reach for a kid. So I shelved it, and I went back to doodling. Maybe I would just be a cartoonist instead. I promise I got way better than this. Then, at the start of high school, I was introduced to Quake 2, or more specifically, Quake 2 mods. My tech teacher at the time took full advantage of his access to a lab of computers and fellow gaming nerds, and would keep the lab open after school for giant LAN parties. Dozens of us would gather for a chance to play a few rounds of Quake 2. But this wasn't normal Quake 2 though. We were playing a mod called 3-Wave CTF, and we played with eraser bots. When someone explained to me that we were playing things that were made by players, my mind was blown once again, and another cornerstone of my life was cemented. I had just discovered a way that I could create games without having to do all of it by myself. Still wasn't going to be on my Nintendo, we were up to N64 at that time, but I could build on top of other people's work and get right into making playable things rather than struggling with getting pixels to move around. Every game I played after that, if it had modding tools or even a level editor, I was diving in. Warcraft, Starcraft, Quake 3, Half-Life, you name it, I probably played with the editor back then. I loved my time creating with those games, but I still wasn't creating my dream projects. There was just too much for one person to do. And while I'd learned to program from a fairly young age, I wasn't going to be making my own eraser bot or a 3-wave capture the flag anytime soon, so I started getting involved in TCs, or total conversion mods. Since at this point in my life I was an edgy teenager, you can imagine the projects weren't the most glamorous, and therefore won't be mentioned by name here, but I was working on big cool stuff, and it seemed like these other people I was working with really knew what they were doing. I was finally going to be part of a big, impressive mod release. And then it didn't happen. You see, big mod releases, those ones you would consider games unto themselves with how big their scope is, the Enderalls, Dotas, Gary's mods, for every one of those success stories, there are 100 others that die on the vine. They get announced, make it through some run of production, and then are scrapped as the reality of scope sets in and the teams slowly dissipate, as they're forced to spend that creative energy on other things, like a job. It takes tens of thousands of man-hours and massive long-term commitment to a vision to bring these to life. I didn't quite understand that yet, but I could see a pattern with all these projects. People were really excited up front, produced a bunch, and then wind down and disappear. Until eventually even the team leads would give up, and the rest of us would be sitting on hundreds of hours of effort that would never see the light of day. It was heartbreaking. Despite this setback, my love for mods never changed, but it turned me away from creating games myself. Instead, I focused on my programming and a career. I started getting pretty darn good at a variety of programming languages, and I fell in love with that craft. Making systems, solving problems for people, and I've done alright for myself providing business software solutions. Though all these years, there's been an annoying itch at the back of my mind calling me back to my original obsession. I still played loads of games and mods. I even obsessively checked editors and installed game engines to take a peek at what was possible, but I hadn't scratched that itch of making one of those big, epic mods, those games on top of games that people would love to play. What we haven't talked about during this story is my love of Fallout. Fallout, and more specifically Fallout 2, had some of my favorite gaming memories. It was like discovering a new music genre. The gritty sci-fi, the adult themes, the guns. It was another mind-blowing experience for a young kinggath. Up to then, my experience with turn-based RPGs had been the first two Baldur's Gates, Icewind Dale, things like that. The fantasy genre dominated that space, but Fallout's fresh take, at least for me, had me hooked. Fast forward to 2016, and my wife is pregnant with our first child and has started going to bed about 4 hours earlier than I'm used to. So I suddenly have a lot of extra free time every night, and wouldn't you know it, the Fallout 4 Creation Kit had recently released. So across the next 7 years, Sim Settlements was born, expanded, born again as Sim Settlements 2, and continues to be a huge part of my life. If you're watching this video, you most likely enjoy Sim Settlements, so I don't have to go into much detail here other than to say that it has been another cornerstone moment for me. It's been the realization of a dream to create a mod for a game I love, a mod so big in scope that it feels like a game and is beloved by lots of people. But that's not the end of the story. Do you remember earlier how I described what usually happens to big mod teams over time? How they dissipate as real-life commitments and the reality of work sets in? Well, we aren't immune to that. In fact, I baked this reality into our development cycle. Throughout the life of Sim Settlements, we work with the understanding that some people are going to leave over time, and we aim for smaller but significant releases like the chapters for SS2. These help the core of the team stay focused and excited. But even the core passionate folks eventually graduate from college or start new careers, and their time available dwindles away. I want to break that cycle. I want this to be forever. I want the friends I've worked with for years to be able to do this as their full-time job. I want to be able to pay voice actors for their valuable time and talent. I want to see a project like Sim Settlements 2 go toe-to-toe in quality with AAA releases. At the same time, I want Sim Settlements 2 to remain free of financial influence and be a project the community can leave their mark on. So today, I'm very proud to announce my new studio, Kinggath Creations. It's not going to be your typical game studio. We aren't aiming to get venture capital and grind for years toward a big release in hopes we make enough money with it to survive to make our next game. The current state of the games industry is awful. So many studios release wonderful games and are forced to shut down. Indie studios will pour their souls into projects and barely be able to feed themselves. I'm building something from the ground up, with the support of fans and the drive of some passionate creators from the Sim Settlements team. We're going to work on small projects to sustain ourselves across a variety of platforms while we slowly build towards something huge. People have asked us when we're going to make Sim Settlements its own game, and we want something like that too. But it will not be a fast process. Fast requires capital that will put suits in charge of the studio instead of creators. Without capital, we got a long road to get there. Knowledge to acquire, tools to build, and a community that we want to keep engaged along the way. Our first venture is one I'm especially excited about, as we got to work directly with our heroes at Bethesda Game Studios to create something new for Skyrim. I'm sure by now you've heard the news of the Skyrim marketplace, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to be a part.
Now let me set expectations for what I'm about to show you. This is no Sim Settlements, but we approach this the same way we do when we make mods for Fallout 4. We love Skyrim, and we want our stuff to fit in perfectly. So please check out our trailer for our first piece of Skyrim content.
I offer greetings to you, yes? 'Cause you'd ask but for a moment of your time. During your venture, I'm sure you came across many trinkets and items of value, but some some items you had to leave behind, yes? Shakar wishes to offer you a service.
The East Empire's position in Skyrim is tenuous, but if we had the approval to do business directly from a Jarl,
Speak. I wish to hear everything.
we'd then be free to expand our activities within each hold. The more holds that agree to our terms, the more that we can do for you.
Swift treasure hunting.
East Empire Expansion was a tightly scoped project with the goal of us learning our way around Skyrim, learning the differences between modding it and Fallout 4, and trying out this new program to see how it goes. Our goal with anything we do through this program is to look at what happened with Creation Club and try to deliver even better value, and start getting closer to those new mini DLC releases we had all hoped for when Creation Club was announced. Unlike Creation Club, we have free reign to do whatever we like, including voiced content, so we can start creating epic stories and systems, and more importantly, we get a percentage of sales forever. In other words, seed money for kinggath creations. This is one of several sources of funding we are pursuing, sources that involve hard work, not handouts from corporate interests. We want to earn our keep and maintain creative control of our works. Some of you may be wondering if that means the end of Sim Settlements. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We're not looking to get rid of our modding hours, we're trying to replace those pesky work hours with more time making game content. Oh, and I'll calm another fear some of you might have had for a moment there. Sim Settlements 2 and all of my Fallout 4 mods will remain free forever. Even if Fallout 4 did have a marketplace, we don't belong there. Fallout 4 is our playground, we don't want to muddy that with money. This idea of kinggath creations started because we were trying to figure out how to keep working on Sim Settlements 2 forever, to prevent our core dev team from having to eventually part ways. As it stands right now, we're at the front end of a planned 2-year development cycle for Sim Settlements 2 content. The first major patch just dropped last week, with many more to come. For those of you who have been with us all these years, thank you for all of your support and your encouragement and your time. I know you have lots of choices for gaming, and we want to continue to make stuff that's worthy of your time. My Fallout 4 modding story started as I was about to become a father. I've now got 2 boys who are starting to show interest in video games. It's got me excited about a future where they are one day talking to their friends about something I made, or heck, maybe that they helped me make. To me, this is the beginning of a chapter leading us towards the next Sim Settlements 2 level project. My next decade of game creation. And I hope you'll all join me on that ride. And one more thanks to those of you who made it to the end of this video through my rambling. Take care and enjoy the games.